So, śaraṇaṁ, what does śaraṇaṁ mean? It's okay. It means shelter or refuge or protection. When we stood up and you sang, what did you notice about the sound? Or your experience of the sound? It reverberates in every direction, yeah? So when I sing, it's not like I'm sending the healing energy only to the left rib that I banged on the cupboard yesterday, for example. The sound reverberates freely in every direction. And so this is one of the reasons why in yoga practices, often, not only do we start with gaṇeśa, but we start with mantra. When you sing the sound Om means everything. From the first sound we can possibly make, to the last sound we can possibly make. So Om, from the beginning to the end, from the first sprouting to the last gasp, and everything in between. And so we're inviting this harmonizing energy into all parts of ourselves. We're inviting this unification, not just to the parts of myself that I like and feel comfortable with, but to the whole field, to the whole gang. Even those parts of myself that I might ordinarily not be so connected to, or I might ordinarily sometimes neglect or even ignore. Yeah? So yoga, in a certain sense, is a recovery project, a remembering, bringing all the members back into togetherness. Yeah? So when we say gaṇeśa śaraṇaṁ, we're saying, as someone who is working with the support of the yoga method, I take refuge in this energy that can bring all the parts together. I take refuge in the gaṇeśa energy, which is not just the energy associated with this archetypal figure, with the elephant's head, which we could speak about at great length, and I have spoken about at length on many previous occasions. And there's even stuff online, and it will be in my book. But this is an energy inside us. The idea is, as a human being, we have this very particular special gift. In the Sanskrit tradition, Sanskrit means well done, well made. And so in Sanskrit, everything's very well defined. And one of the defining characteristics of the human being is that we have conscience. We have this capacity to observe ourselves and decide, is that the right thing or not? And so the idea is that the gaṇeśa energy could be considered to be the pilot guiding light of our conscience. Have you noticed that when we do something and our mind and our heart and our gut all say yes, and you feel very settled, if you continue with that action, generally you still feel cohesive, yeah? What happens if we have a decision to make and we feel not sure, we feel confused or rushed or just feel uncertain, and then we just go ahead and make a fevered decision anyway? Have you noticed what tends to happen? Does acting from a place of being fevered and uncertain usually bring steady, calm consequences? Elliot? No, yeah, that's my answer too. Has anybody got a different answer? Yeah. So gaṇeśa śaraṇaṁ means, well, we can take refuge in bringing everything together, giving ourselves space and time to gather ourselves. And so this is one of the basic ideas of meditation practice. What does meditate mean? Daniela, you are from a Latin-speaking country, yes? How do you say meditate in your first language?
Meditare.
Meditare. Is anybody here? Sylvia, how do you say it in your first language?
Meditar.
Meditar. Estar en el medio. Estar en el medio, yes? To stand in the middle. Meditation means to inhabit the medi-state, the state of being balanced, otherwise known as the state of yoga. So the idea is, remember Krishna's definition, yoga is evenness and skillfulness. When I come into evenness, I set myself up to be able to navigate the potential obstacles and let's say predictably unpredictable realities of the day a bit more easily. Is this true? So the idea is we gather. So I maybe take a few moments at the beginning of the day to give thanks for all of these miraculous powers with which I experience the myriad wonder of life and existence. And then I invite them all to come into a state of all oneness. Yeah? Or we could say at-one-ment or attunement. It's like these are all powerful things. Would you agree that your sense powers and your action powers and your mind and body, they all have power, yeah? Yes, no? Yeah? Have you ever felt your senses pulling you in different directions? Has anybody ever had this experience? You're walking along the street, I'm going to go and see my friend Michael, and on the way, oh, what's that? Oh, is that some freshly cut pineapple? And then your friend comes by playing the guitar, and you're like, yeah, and you, oh, I'd like to listen to the guitar, I'd like to the pineapple, I want to go and see my friend. Have you had this experience? How does it feel when you feel pulled in lots of different directions?
Dizzy.
Yeah. It reminded me of a song. I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning. Yeah, like it. And does it feel good to feel dizzy? There's another pop song that just came into my mind. Natalie Imbruglia's massive song, hit song of the 1990s. Nothing's right and torn. You know that song? I'm all out of faith, yes? You feel torn. Is this a nice way to feel? Do you want to feel torn? No, how do you want to feel? Together, yeah? You want to feel yoga, you want to feel gaṇeśa. So the idea is, in the morning, the start of the day, yoga recognizes the world is constantly going to be bombarding us with all these different impressions. The world is a place of endless beauty and wonder. Is this true? Is it not an amazing thing to be alive? So it's easy for us to get kind of spun out because there's so much wonder. But yoga says, well, if we want to enjoy the wonder, we have to be able, we're much better able to do that when we stay a little bit more balanced, a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more fully in whatever we are experiencing this moment. So one way we can consider this is that these ganas, these gang members of this field of our being, they're like members of an orchestra. They're instrumental powers. Make sense, yeah? Has anybody ever been to see a wonderful orchestra play music? What do they do before they play?
Yeah.
They tune up, yeah. These are all expert musicians. They can play with their eyes closed. They've been playing together for decades, perhaps. But before the performance, they spend a few minutes tuning up. They play the first movement. Oh, the audience is already in bliss. What do they do before the second movement? They retune. Yeah? How many strings in the orchestra? A lot, yeah? How many strings in this orchestra? A lot more. So the idea is we have to make an effort to attune. And so the yogic method is a practical way to attune. Whatever I'm doing, let me invite all of myself to be here. So if I'm doing a seated meditation practice, I take the support of whatever I'm allowing my awareness to flow towards, and that becomes a point around which I can gather. towards which I can orient, and then I can kind of feel a little bit more attuned. Yeah? If I'm doing asana, then I'm not just doing it with my body, I'm focusing on what I'm doing. I'm feeling what I'm doing. I'm doing it with an emotional intent, or hopefully I'm doing this, yeah? Like one thing I always say I often say when I'm teaching yogic movement is, how do you want to feel in life? Good? Other words? Balanced?
Serene.
Serene.
Energetic.
You want to feel energy, yeah? So when you practice how you want to feel, yeah? Yoga is very practical. It recognizes we get good at what we practice. So especially when we're working with a yoga technique, we should be feeling how we want to feel. So do the practice in a way that you relish it, you enjoy it. It makes you feel energy and presence and serenity and calm and balance and integration. Yes? You have a question, Ben? No.
That just really resonated with me.
Good. So in the early years of my yoga practice, there was a very distinct absence of yoga. Yeah? I aggressively pursued peacefulness. Did it work? No. Yeah? And this is the story, this is one thing this is why I feel why yoga matters so much. In the world now, in the media we see a lot of, you don't have to look far before you see signs of division. Would you agree? Like people occupying different polarized extreme positions. Yeah? Now one thing that has typified human history, I would say, is this revolutionary pattern. A situation emerges, some of us don't like it. And we don't like it to the degree that we fight against it, and we fight to overthrow it. And then what happens? The thing that we were fighting against gets replaced with something that has taken on so many of the qualities that made us despise it in the first place. Yeah? When you fight against something, you become good at fighting. So we see throughout history, there's a revolution, we throw out the corrupt old regime. But in its place is something very similar with different names. Is this true? And so I would suggest that we need to go beyond the way of the revolutionary and step forwards in the way of the evolutionary. And the evolutionary builds on what is already here. Doesn't try to fight against or destroy what is already here, but works with it to enhance it. So to have the humility and the honesty to recognize that even if the system as it is has some things that are not working so well anymore, it probably isn't a great idea to just try and attack it or to just throw it out wholesale, because it has many good qualities. And if I want peace, if I want unity, if I want harmony, if I go on the attack, what am I doing? I'm actually fighting against myself. Because I cannot create peace by trying to kill somebody. And when I take this extreme ism, schism, black-white thinking, revolutionary position, I'm always attacking somebody. Does that make sense? So I would suggest the way forwards is we need to be more reconciliatory. And this is what yoga practice is all about. Can I reconcile all these different parts of myself? Can I invite parts of myself that sometimes I've neglected into a state of wholeness or peacefulness? Does that make sense? I covered a lot of ground in a very quick way there. Yeah? So gaṇeśa śaraṇaṁ, I take refuge in my capacity to bring together, rather than fighting against. So gaṇeśa got his name when the people who had previously chopped his head off, when he forgave them, when he invited them in, when he accepted them. So the idea of the power of yoga, or the power of gaṇeśa, is the energy that has the vastness, the presence, to include and reconcile, to meet even that which would seem like the enemy in a real, honest conversation, so we can see what we actually share and how we can actually support each other, rather than rejecting or fighting or condemning. Is that clear? Yeah? So when we say gaṇeśa śaraṇaṁ, we're taking refuge in our capacity to reconcile and include in a way that is more inclusive than we've perhaps managed to up to now. So we're constantly inviting that expansion, that reaching a little bit wider. Yeah? So this is why we begin with gaṇeśa. Because yoga is very practical. And yoga recognizes, they say in India, the first step is half the journey. Is this true? This is why it doesn't work to fight against what you hate. Because if you start off fighting, you just get good at fighting. You know the story. The crusader gets crusaded. The freedom fighter gets good at violence. There's a writer called Charles Eisenstein. I really recommend his work. The more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, especially. But he talks about this thing. It's like there's a dominant story in the world, a story of conflict. If we don't like this story of separation and exploitation and conflict, if we fight against it using its language, using its terminology, we get pulled into that paradigm and we actually contribute to the continuation of that way. So what yoga asks us to do is to find the courage and the presence and the steadiness in the face of this example that we don't like, to actually create a new example from the capacity we have inside. Because this is one of the secrets of yoga. All of us are expert yogins already, to some quite elevated degree. There are two qualifications to practice yoga in the Indian tradition. Do you know what they are? Everybody's qualified. One, to be born. Yeah? Second, to know that I am not in a state of yoga. To know that I do not know. This is what they say in the Upanishads. If you want to practice, you need to practice from a place of owning the fact that you're not fully there. Because if you think, oh yeah, I know, it's like I'm closing down my capacity to learn something new. So to always remember, I don't know, so let me be curious. Let me maintain a sense of wonder and inquiry and exploration. Yeah? So these first two qualifications. But, looking at this song, we are constituted, we said we start with earth, yeah? We are made of the earth. Yeah? Is it true? What about water? Are we made of water? Fire? Did you have lunch, Umashankar?
Yeah.
What is happening to it?
Yeah,
It's being incinerated, yeah? Do we have air? Space? Yeah? Now, if I put some water that has sand in it into a glass, it's all mixed up, but I pour it in, what happens in not much time at all? It separates, yeah? So the earth and the water separate. Yeah? We've all witnessed this. What about here? Earth, water, fire, air and space. These things don't cohere. They don't gather in a state of balance very easily. That takes something very special to make them all stay in a state of integration. But we're doing it all the time when we're alive. So we already have a tremendous capacity to reconcile things that wouldn't necessarily, at first glance, seem to be able to be reconciled or integrated. But we do it all the time. Yeah? So we can do it more. We can do it with ideas that seem to be contradictory. Once we start to explore yoga, we will encounter paradox. Once we start to dive into the yoga teachings, we're almost guaranteed to encounter paradox. For example, you have to surrender, you have to take full responsibility. It seems like a paradox. Yoga is about reconciling it. Another definition of yoga from the Upanishads is to walk the razor's edge. It's like that definition in the Gita, to be in a state of balance. Does anybody like slacklining or tightrope walking? No? Do you have friends who do that? Do they really like it? Yeah. Why do people, when they get good at slacklining, love it so much? If you're highlining, if you're walking on a slackline over a huge drop, where are you when you're on that slackline?
Right there.
There's nowhere else you can be. Yeah? Now, even if you're a very skillful yoga practitioner, if I'm walking along the street, I can be fully aware of the sensations in my feet and the touch of the sun and the breeze on my skin and the movements of my breath. I can really be present, but it's unlikely that I'll be able to sustain the same degree of presence as the person who could fall to their death at any moment walking across the canyon. Yeah? Is this true? Once you get a taste for whole system presence, walking on the pavement isn't so thrilling anymore. Does that make sense? And this is how and why yoga works. Once we experience what it's like to be fully here, when we're not so fully here, how does it feel? Not quite so satisfying, yeah? Would you agree? There's a beautiful proverb in Sanskrit. It says, Manasyekam vachasyekam karmanyekam mahatmana manasyanyat vachasyanyat karmanyanyat duratmana. So atman means a soul, yeah? So it says somebody whose mind and thought is in one place, whose speech is saying something else, and whose action is doing something else again. How is such a person? That is a soul in torment. Is this true? But someone whose thought, speech and action are all one, mahatmana, that is a great soul. So when you're on the slack line, when you're bouncing on the razor's edge, and you're fully there, it's like your awareness is very focused, but it's also somehow bigger. Does that make sense? Have you experienced this? Yeah? So once you've walked on the tightrope, you notice when you're not on the so balanced more easily. Is this true? Yes, no? Yeah? It's like the orchestra. Did anybody here play in an orchestra when you were a child? You did, Sylvia, yeah? The 10-year-old orchestra players, they've come out of tune. They don't notice, they're just playing their best, yeah? But the people who've been playing in the orchestra for 50 years, as soon as they start to come out of tune, they're able to respond. Because they've practiced keeping in tune. Yeah? And so they live in a state of harmony and symphony more easily. Yeah? Is this true? Caroline, is it true? Not sure? Not sure. So recently I had a very beautiful experience. I met a man called Lion Lifer, who lives in Chicago. But he came to Mysore. He's been in India for a couple of months. He's a flute master. He came to India the first time in 1964 on a scholarship and became the disciple of, what's his name? Murdeshwar is the surname. Devendra Murdeshwar, who was one of the greatest Indian Bansuri flute players of the last century. So 1964. Ever since that time, Lion has been practicing every day. He's been using this discipline of music as his yoga practice. I have a very good friend called Ravi who lives nearby, who's also a flute master. And we've known each other for some time now. Lion gave a workshop on Indian flute. So I went to the concert and I thought, oh, that's it for me. And then Ravi said, James, tomorrow you come into the workshop, yeah? I said, Oh, no, you come into the workshop tomorrow. He says, don't miss it. Okay, so if my friend Ravi says this, okay, I must go. And this workshop is one of the most beautiful experiences I've had in India. I spent a lot of time here. So I don't say that lightly, because this man, all his life he's been practicing. And the way he speaks about music is so down to earth and so humble, but it's like his whole being has been purified in this fire of discipline. A steady fire. Every day he's apprenticed himself to this art of harmony, to this divine music. In the lineage that Ravi and Lion play in, one of the basic teachings is play because you love it. And when you practice or when you perform, it doesn't matter if anybody else is in the room, because God is listening. So make your play worship. Make your play prayer. And this is another key or foundational teaching in yoga, is to make our actions prayer. Now if I say to make your actions a prayer, what do you think of? Does it make sense? You're thinking, what on earth are you talking about? The Sanskrit word for prayer is very, very beautiful. It's prartha. Say prartha. So artha means the means, and pra means towards. So prartha means to orient oneself towards the means. So if my prayer, if my deep longing is peacefulness, or is harmony, or is balance, or wholeness, or integration, then I practice peacefulness and harmony and integration. I embody and share as best as I can peacefulness and harmony and integration. And the idea is the more I practice it, the more I get tuned to it. So once I'm tuned to something, when I come out of it, I can notice a bit more readily. So this is the idea of a yogic method. Like when I do a meditation technique, it's like I tune the orchestra of my being. When I keep practicing, I can tune a bit more subtly, a bit more precisely, a bit more inclusively. So in yoga, the practitioner is always invited to work from gross to subtle. So I start at the immediate level. So when I sit to meditate, for example, I start first. Let me sit. Let me connect to the element of the earth. Let me feel stable, easy. Let me assume a sustainable position. Let me check, is energy able to flow? Do I feel like the element of fire is in balance? Like I'm not ravenously hungry, I'm not freezing cold, I can stay here. Is the air moving in and out easily? Do I feel spacious? And from the gross elements, then I can start to move subtler and subtler. So the idea is any discipline in the Indian tradition can become a yoga, can become a practice or a tantra, a technology to help us access yoga. And the idea is the more that we walk the tightrope, the more that we walk in the path of attunement, the easier it is to stay there. Because we get good at what we practice. So I practice aggressiveness, I just become better at aggressiveness. If I practice peacefulness and attunement, slowly, steadily, it will dissolve these disintegrating tendencies. Are you slightly more convinced, Caroline? Yeah? Shall we sing another song? Yeah? So we'll sing this song, Maheshwari Jagadishwari. And this is about gathering all these parts. Jagat is a word for the world. It means that which is moving. So Eliot mentioned Patanjali's definition of yoga, to bring our awareness into a state in which the movements are things we're aware of. So we're moving with greater awareness. The world's always moving. So this song is inviting us to be aware of all these parts of ourselves and to invite them all into balance, to acknowledge them all. even those parts that I might not normally acknowledge so much. So for example, upasteshwari, the creative capacity. 2 days back, a friend from England was just passing through Mysore. He's on a cycling trip, but he came to a retreat with me, and he thanked me the other day. He said, yeah, since that retreat, it was like a reset. He's retired now. He says, so he's been doing practices for creativity. So he's been acting and painting and writing. And he said, oh, since that retreat, I've been doing these things. And I feel like now I'm living. I'm not aging. Because he was working with his creative capacity. His children are grown up. He's helped them do that. He's helped create a business, but he doesn't want to do that anymore. So previously his creative capacity had been fully occupied being a father and a businessman. He'd retired. He wasn't feeling well. And so he took an honest check. Oh yeah, my creative part, I'm not really acknowledging it. And once he acknowledged it, he was empowered to do something about it. And he has. He's feeling better. Yeah? Makes sense? So we'll sing to all these capacities.